Bojo, everyone, and welcome. We are honored to be in discussion with Anishinaabe Ukrainian writer and speaker Patty Krawec around themes from her two books, Becoming Kin, An Indigenous Call to Unforgetting the Past and Reimagining Our Future, and Bad Indians Book Club, Reading at the Edge of a Thousand Worlds. Miigwech to Patty for generously sharing her time and knowledge with us today. Where to start?
I think the things in Bad Indians Book Club and in Becoming Kin are good places for people to start to plug into if they're starting to figure out that wait a minute, I've been lied to.
Right?
You're starting to figure that out,
Yeah.
then these are really good books about revisiting history and then respecting the knowledge developed by marginalized people.
Support Indigenous artists.
Both covers of my books are
Yeah,
they're just gorgeous.
gorgeous. And
Yeah.
who did the beadwork?
That's Graham Paradise. He's local
Oh,
Métis. Um,
beautiful.
yeah, so he did that, and then that is Nicole Hatfield, and she
Wow.
is a Comanche artist,
Yeah,
and
absolutely
just
beautiful.
yeah, she does all kinds of beautiful work. And on my blog, so thousandworlds.ca on my blog, there's a link to her website as well as Johnny J. Because as you there's flash fiction, serialized flash fiction throughout the book.
Yeah.
And when you get to, I think it's the piece just before memoir, yeah, chapter just before memoir, there's a young man who's wearing a T-shirt with Sasquatch on it that says "Live, Laugh, Lurk."
No, I
Yeah,
love
and that's a
it.
that's a that's a real T-shirt. People can go to Johnny J's website. I have stickers that I'll bring to book signing events, and if I like you, I'll put a sticker in your book.
Oh, I love it. Explore your roots.
When I do workshops, um, and I've done workshops, I haven't done one recently, but there's an activity that I often do, which is called Roots and Roots, which I kind of talked about a little bit at the beginning with the land acknowledgement.
Yeah.
It's your family tree. But don't overthink it, right? If you don't know somebody's name, if you just know grandma, grandpa, great grandma, great grandpa, like that's fine, right? Like don't overthink it. Don't start signing up for 23andMe or ancestry.com or any of that.
Yeah.
But but then alongside it, you can put down places that they were from. And you may not like you might know that this part was from Ireland, but you don't know a lot about them, but you can figure out historically what was happening for Irish people at that time, right? And so
Yeah.
that's how you can start thinking about where you came from, what the historical context was for that movement. You know that they moved in the 1800s, what was going on in the 1800s, the potato famine. you know?
Yeah.
And so you can start thinking about that history and start building your sense of history
Yeah.
and your sense of connection to place. And then how did they build relationships here in this place? And so that's part of understanding your own history and returning to yourself. And so I did an event up at the Burlington Writers Festival for Bad Indians Book Club. And the host, Parampreet, who is amazing, such a good interviewer. Uh, but he started because in Bad Indians Book Club, I encourage everybody to introduce themselves,
Yeah.
to think about where they came from, how they got here. And so that's what he did instead of doing a land acknowledgement.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
He said, you know what, inspired by your book, I'm going to do this. And he did. And he talked about his own history, the impact of the partition. Yeah, but when India and Pakistan were partitioned into two different countries, and the impact that had on his family and how they fled that and coming here. And I just thought that was really cool because it helped me understand things about him that I didn't know. I had no idea. So yeah, maybe combine
Yeah.
that with your land acknowledgement. Think about your
Yeah.
own roots and roots, right? Roots
Yeah.
ROOTS and then roots ROUTES. Like who are your people and how did you get here? Because
Yeah.
that's part of and that's part of what I talk about in Becoming Kin. is if you came here and your ancestors were actively part of or used to displace Indigenous people,
Yes.
or maybe they were slave owners or slave catchers, or any of these things where they were actively benefiting or engaging in displacement, well, then that sets up your response.
Respect all living things.
But it has been coming back to me a lot over the, obviously over the last few years, thinking, well, maybe rocks are alive. And for the Ojibwe, there's one elder who had said that, yeah, and I can't remember his name. I read it in one of the books where he says, they're not all alive, but some of them are. And it's best to just assume that this one might be.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't want to make a mistake. They're not all alive, but some of them are. So you may want to, and then that's kind of a really profound shift towards how we think about the world around us and the way we think about the things that we use
Hmm.
and what we're using them for. If you've got no way to bring that rock home, then why don't you just treat it as, like, why are you hiding it away somewhere? Why are treat it with some respect.
Yes.
Treat it like, okay, like you brought home a stray puppy, right? Treat it like treat it like with some respect. But it really is, if we're going to repair our relationship to land, we need to understand it has life on its own terms. It
Mhm.
doesn't just exist to meet our needs. We exist also to meet the land's needs.
Yeah.
It's very reciprocal. And that's part of, in the first chapter, where are the Black and Indigenous people on your shelves? And then the later chapters, well, whose land are you on?
Hmm.
Who was pushed aside so that you could develop vibes and,
Yeah.
so you could have vibes in this forest? you know
Yeah.
how
Exactly.
can you got to think about that. Who was there that's not there anymore? Who do these trees remember?
Hmm.
You mentioned about rocks holding memory. Who do these rocks remember? Who else sat on this rock
Yeah.
and looked over the valley? Who does this rock remember? And like, because I talk about the grapes of wrath as well, and the tenant farmers, and they were saying, we lived and worked and died, bled for this land, blah blah blah. Well, the land remembers other people who could make exactly the same claim that grandpa killed, because grandpa killed Indians and pa killed snakes. you know
Yeah.
um you know who else does the land remember, and is it mad at you? you know like, is it annoyed, not meant necessarily with you personally, but with the fact of the people who existed in relationship and took care of the land while the land took care of them, and that kind of reciprocity. So that phrase where she writes this, about creation being a conversation between stones, and I've spent like a year, more than a year, trying to figure out where that was, because I'd never heard that in the Ojibwe creation story. And so I'm Googling, I'm asking people, and then I was part of a circle, and I asked the woman who was leading the circle. It was over the course of a year, we were getting a lot of knowledge from her. And so I asked her about it, and she's like, I've never heard that before. And she's somebody who, like, hears stuff, right? Like, she knows stuff. She says, I've never heard that before. And then she says, but let's talk about creation. Let's talk about the creation story. And everybody like, yeah, let's talk about the creation story. Well, the sound of creation is a rattle. That
Oh.
was the first sound. Was so creator, Gejemanadu, which just means great mystery, doesn't mean Anishinaabe concept is not like some great personalized Christian God spirit, like Christians can. It's like this great mystery. It's like, we don't know. There's something out there that's
Yeah.
doing stuff. We don't know, which I think is a very intellectually honest position to take.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Guillaume Manadou is out there and thinking thoughts, whatever, and it's the sound of a rattle. And as soon as she said that, I was like, I blurted out stones.
Yes.
And she's like, what? And I said, what's inside a rattle?
Yeah.
Stones. Little tiny stone, little stones. It's the conversation. The sound of the rattle is the conversation between stones, and everybody in the room was like, ooh. freaked us all out because that's, and even when I wrote that in Becoming Kin, I didn't know. I thought it was like this beautiful phrase, but I had no idea what it connected to. So I didn't know. And now I feel like now it's like, it's the rattle. The sound of the rattle was these stones talking to each other, and creation came out of that.
Yes.
And I was just like, that is the most. And these are like, how old are rocks?
Right.
Rocks, like, right? Like they've been around since like forever, you know?
Right.
And also the thing about stones also connects into Bad Indians Book Club. Because
Oh,
like I said, there's flash fiction before each chapter. And so it's a Dear Woman story that I just made up out of my own head. And so, so she has her tragedy, whatever it is. We don't, I don't say what it is. She's just running away from something. She becomes she dies, she becomes Dear Woman. That's not a spoiler. That's just part of the original
yeah.
story. And then I
Yeah.
just kind of ran with it and imagined what her life would be like. And so she runs away. She winds up in what is now Prince Edward Island. And then she runs away again. Because, our girl likes to, she can't, she can't like focus. She needs to keep running away. So she runs away again. And then she decides that she comes to a place where she doesn't understand anything. She doesn't understand the language. She knows that, the people are different. And so she decides that it's time to learn stillness. She's been running. It's time to learn stillness. And the best beings to teach stillness are stones. And so she sits with the stones to learn from them. And she sits with them for so long that she becomes stone herself. And we were asking this question about what time period would you like to go to? If you could go anywhere in time, where would you go? And one of the women on this board said, I wouldn't go to like a specific time, but I would want to sit on the Eastern Seaboard and see who shows up. And so that's kind of my little nod to her as well, because if you're going to sit on the Eastern Seaboard for 1,000 years, for 2,000 years, you're going to be a rock. And so she becomes stone. And so that kind of carries forward into Bad Indians Book Club as well. And then one day she decides not to be stone anymore.
Yeah.
Like she just, I don't talk about that. I just kind of jump to now. And suddenly she's tending a fire, because that's
Yeah.
how short stories work.
Understand how we are and aren't insulated from things.
Now, I'm really fortunate. I have a university degree. My husband's a white guy. I work for a bank. Banks, he was in IT, so, he made decent money. We have a house. So I'm insulated from a lot of things. But I'm not insulated from everything, right? Like the cops aren't going to care. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
at this, the cops aren't going to care. The healthcare system isn't going to care. They're going to see Native on my file and make assumptions,
Yeah.
because it doesn't even matter how dark I am. If the institution has labeled me as Indigenous, that's all they need, right?
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all they need. But otherwise, the shop owner, if I go into Shoppers Drug Mart or Walmart, they don't know that that I own my own house and and drive a
Yeah.
car and all. They don't know that. They just see a brown person walking around in their store. So I am insulated from some things. It's very fortunate, but I'm not insulated from others. And when we think about the ways, and I like talking about insulation more so than privilege, I think it I think it conveys things to people in a much more useful way, because people will rightly say, well, I don't have privilege. I don't
Yep.
live in a big house. I still have bills to pay. I got to go to work every day. Like the way we think about privilege doesn't help us understand what, the way we're talking about it, the way it means. So I like to think about it more as being insulated.
Hmm.
There are all kinds of ways that, different groups of people are insulated or not insulated from different, from police violence, or
Yeah.
from stuff like that. The US used to have, still has sundown towns where Black people know it's not safe to be
Yeah.
there after dark. Canada has sundown towns where Native people know it's not safe to be there
Yeah.
after dark. So this stuff is not that old. There are people alive today who
Yes.
experienced that Jim Crow past, right? So it's not, and that's part of what I wanted to do with Becoming Kin, was show that these things are connected and not that long ago, right? We
No.
think of it as being like so long ago, but I saw a meme about how Barbara Walters, Martin Luther King, and Anne Frank were all the same age.
Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah, they were all the
Yeah.
same age. And yet we think of them as belonging to three really distinct periods of time. Barbara Walters is the present because she was still alive at the time. Martin
Mhm.
Luther King executed in the Civil War, so long ago. Anne Frank. So no, they were all the same age.
Mhm.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Like I read that and I was like, wow, yes, that's true. Why don't we think about that? Why don't we think like that?
Yeah. Do not center blame, shame, and guilt.
We don't have to collapse into grief and guilt and, be useless. We can say, wow, I was a child welfare worker for 16 years. I can't fix those harms. I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I can start a foundation.
Yes.
I can do things that will, that will maybe stop other kids from solve the poverty problem for some families, keep them housed, keep them fed, support organizers who are organizing in ways to build their communities. And so the places where we were part of harm become, okay, so what action can I take now
Yes.
so that these harms don't continue to be perpetuated? It's not about guilting and shaming. It's about
No.
figuring out. And maybe we should feel guilty. I do feel guilty. There are
Yes.
things that I have done where I do feel bad. There was a time where I was invited to speak at a church and it was on October 8th. Right. So it was the day after October 7th, when Hamas, launched, a large scale resistance. And I didn't say anything because I figured, with other things happening at the time in the church and things the pastor had said to me, I figured they wouldn't want me to. And I was like, why was I silent on that?
Mhm.
And so I feel bad. I feel terrible about that. Um, and I will always feel terrible about that. And that's okay, right? Like I don't want absolution for that. Nobody can give me absolution for that. But that feeling mobilizes me, right? Like I got Palestine hanging behind me. I
Yeah.
got a solidarity flag hanging over there. I bring Palestine and Venezuela and Congo and Sudan, like all of those places of anti-colonial defiance I bring with me. And I'm
Mhm.
not silent anymore. And so I think our guilt and our shame can be constructive. It can mobilize us towards action.
Yes.
And there's that great phrase that Miriam Kaba has, right? Let this radicalize you rather than lead you to despair.
Yes.
And that's the thing, right? When we find out what we have been part of or what our ancestors were part of, that can mobilize us to action. And so much of that, I mean, and that's where the foundation actually started, was somebody on social media was just, laying their guilt and their shame all over me. And that's exhausting. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
not helpful because what they're looking for is absolution. They
Yes.
want me to tell them that they're okay, that whatever. And I'm not going to do that. So I got really snotty one day with this one guy who was just like burying me in white guilt. And I said, look, if you feel so bad, why don't you pay some rent? And then I was like, wait, that's a good idea. So I created this fundraiser on Patreon. And now it's a nonprofit, it's a registered nonprofit. And we move about $8,000 to $10,000 every month from settlers to Indigenous people and individuals who have need and to organizers. And so this like snarky little comment has kept he keeps like 3 or 4 people housed every month now. It
That's
does, and
awesome.
and it does all, more than that. We support, a food sovereignty organization,
Yeah.
collective, and all kinds of stuff.
Join a policy committee.
One thing that I'm really a big fan of that I talk about in becoming kin is get involved where you work. You can join a policy committee.
Yeah.
Nobody likes policy. They think it's really boring. They think it's all kinds of stuff, and so we tend not to want to join those committees. I was on the Health and Safety Committee at work, and getting involved in policy at any level, that's where changes happen. Like I said about
Yes.
the past system, that was policy. So wherever you're working, get involved with policy
Mhm.
and then analyze them. How does this seemingly neutral policy, what assumptions are we making about, about the people involved in this? What are we assuming about them that
Yeah.
may not be true? Because policies impact Black and, Indigenous, like marginalized people differently because we move through the world differently.
Connect and reflect. in order to really get to know something, you do need to sit with it, right? And take that time to reflect. And, the whole thing with our society where it often is go, 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 it's like we need to slow down at
Yeah.
times and really take that time to make those connections and to learn from one another.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But like, so Niagara Movement School, very optimistically named. We're doing that. Actually, we're working through the book Let This Radicalize You, and we're really sitting with it. We're I think we're about halfway through now. We started in the fall. We're sitting every other week. We're
Nice.
sitting with a new chapter and talking it through and listening to each other and all of that. And that's, yeah, like you said, that's important. We don't just, oh, okay, and this month's book is, and this month's book and this month's book. It's like, no, we're gonna sit with this one.
Yeah.
We're gonna work through it together, and we're gonna wrestle with some of the ideas, and we're gonna think about how they connect to our own organizing or our desire to start organizing. And it's very much drop in. Like, you don't have to have been part of this since the fall to show up. You don't even have to have read the book to show up. Enough of us have
Yeah.
read it that you can be part of the conversation, whether or not you were able to read it or do there's also like a workbook. And I think it's so important for us to do that as
Yeah.
communities, right? Like, particularly when we feel scared and helpless. Start a reading group. It's the
Yeah.
easiest thing in the world to do. Even if all you have is one friend, where you're
Yeah.
both going to read the same book and talk about it. A friend of mine is actually giving me a copy of a book because she wants to talk about it and she needs somebody to read it so that she can
Oh, I
talk
love
to them about
it.
it. So she's giving me a book so that I can read it and we can talk about it. But it's the easiest thing, like talking about mobilizing people into action.
Yes.
Start a reading group and then let the things that you read, let those, because that builds community, that builds relationship, and then let those things that you read move you to action. But when we talk to other people about what you're learning, and that's what Bad Indians Book Club is all about, then it gives us the possibility of working together to change things, to make a
Yeah.
difference, to show up to regional council meetings and speak articulately about the issue that's in front of them. To either to engage in protest that's meaningful, that's not just a vigil that helps everybody feel like they've done something and the
Yeah.
politicians talk about how bad they feel, but doesn't make any specific asks and has absolutely no mechanism to hold them accountable. Well, what's
Yeah.
the point? What are we doing then? If we're not coming to them with specific asks and we're not developing any way of holding them accountable, then what are we doing? We're actually just perpetuating the system.
Yeah.
It's a little steam valve. It
Yeah.
blows off some steam. The politicians love it when we do that because then we feel like we've done something and we all go home and nothing changes.
Come together and organize.
And there's so much that we can do. For me, it starts with reading and talking about the things that we're reading and then allowing those things to mobilize us towards action. For other people, it's going to be different things,
Yeah.
right? And there is so much that is, great, especially in Niagara. That's one reason that we started Movement School, is because there's loads of organizing that's happening in Niagara. Like when you were at the powwow, Niagara Reproductive Justice was there with a
Yeah.
table. And there's the Radical Care Collective that is a disability rights organization, and the Niagara Anti-Racism Committee, or people organizing for Palestine, and we want to bring people together as well, so that we know what's happening, so that we can show up for each other, and so that when it hits the fan, we can also mobilize together. If you organize to support the unhoused population,
Yeah.
if you organize for reproductive justice, if you organize for stable housing, affordable housing, for access to mental health care, any of these things that are
Yeah.
happening that they're going south in our cities, you organize for those things, you're also helping Indigenous people because we live here too.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
are greatly affected by all of those things, right? We are
Yeah.
disproportionately represented in jails,
Yeah.
in the homeless population, in emergency medical care as opposed to stable medical care. We are involved, we are impacted so These were your problems that your society created. If you fix them, if you organize, so you don't have to come and help the Indians, right? We will help ourselves. But if you organize for these things, that does help us
Right.
because we all live in cities. And so people are like, oh, because they don't always think about that. I want more people organized in the places where they're
Yes.
already organized, right? Your soccer club, your school, like you go to clubs in schools.
Yeah.
I want more people doing stuff like that. Just being in places where they're already organized and starting to think about these things. Okay, then what can we collectively do as a union,
Yeah.
as a classroom, as a librarian, as as any of these things? What can I do here?
Yeah.
You know, what, because you're making choices about what, for libraries, you're making choices about what books to display, what books to retire from your shelves. What books to add to your shelves. You're making choices. So what are you making those choices based on?
And then with your book, like you mentioned with the becoming kin, where at the end of the chapters, there's always like a little action piece. So that's even something that, teachers could read the book or anybody reading the book and then pulling out those action pieces that, are doable for them to implement, which is awesome too. Like I love books where it actually gives some suggestions where it's like, okay, the author doesn't have to do the work for you, but it's here's something to get you started.
Yeah. And that was
Yeah.
actually, I have to give my editor credit. That was her idea. She said,
Nice.
you're giving us all of these big feelings about stuff that we may not have known, and we don't know what to do with those feelings
Yeah.
other than feel bad. And so let's have a task, give it something they can, and so then the tasks build. It starts off very simple. Just
Yeah.
notice, where are we on your bookshelves?
Yeah.
In the movies you watch, in your neighborhood, where are we? And I say, don't read too much into it. We're not, just notice. Because in the later chapters, the task is then to go back and start analyzing
Yes.
why we're in different places and why we're not, and stuff like that, or to think about replacing us. If we're not on your bookshelves, then put
Yes.
us on your bookshelves.
Yes.
If we're not in your movies, then choose movies differently. Choose to watch different movies. There's things you can do. And then by the last chapter, it's okay, it's time to start organizing.
Yeah.
Organize something.
Yeah. Education for Change, headed by Georgian College.
They decided to build a class at Georgian College around becoming kin. That was the
Oh,
action that they took. Was, okay, you know what? We're going to use becoming kin as a core text for this course.
hope through connection.
Things are connected,
Yes.
which means that the things we do are connected. And to me, that's profoundly hopeful. I don't want
Yeah.
people to be depressed.
Well, I hope
All
you have a
right.
wonderful rest of your day, Patty,
Thanks. You
and
too.
we'll connect again soon.
Yes, we will.
I'm
All
confident
right.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. All
bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.
If you don't want to miss any of our upcoming videos, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below as well as the notifications. And you can also visit our website, chaptersforchange.com, for educational resources and to see what we're up to. See you soon.